Good afternoon, brothers and sisters, and welcome to the Manalapan Stake Fireside with Brother and Sister Phillips. We are grateful that you are here. We are grateful that they are here. We acknowledge our stake president, Mark Young, on the stand, as well as President Tom Bennett, counselor in the now I'm going to say it, counselor in the stake presidency, and my name is Brian Crockett, another counselor in the stake presidency. We appreciate Elliot Plummer, who has given us some prelude music, and we appreciate Brother Paul Canova as well, who is taking care of the behind-the-scenes technical stream for you who aren't with us and are watching it virtually. We would like to begin our fireside by singing hymn 255, Carry On, and then Sister Deanna Roberts will offer an invocation. Brother Sam Plummer will lead us in the singing.
I said that to him it was a very fitting song for us to be singing with all of the things that they've done since they've been home. You wouldn't believe it. Dear Father in heaven, we are so grateful for the circumstances that we can meet in the peace and the love that we share with one another. We're especially grateful for the Phillips and the service that they have given and that they are so willing to share with us. We ask that thy Spirit will be with them to bring to their minds those things that they will that they will be pleased that they have shared with us, and to bring to their minds that those things that we need to hear. And we say these things in the holy name of thy beloved Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Thank you, Sister Roberts. We are so thrilled to have Dennis and May Phillips with us today. You know their background better than I do, probably. Former stake president, President Phillips was, of the Mount Olympus Stake. And May, they have a great family, and they have a long history with many of you. We will now turn the time over to them to share with us their testimonies and their story. And after they're finished, we will have a benediction by Sister Shelley Crockett.
Good evening, brothers and sisters. We are very grateful for President Young inviting us to share our testimonies and our experiences with you. And if I had known it was going to be this intimate of a group, we could have just done it in President Young's basketball court at home, and then it would have been fine, and we could have. But I hope that tonight, as we visit with you, that you will feel comfortable in asking questions, and let's make this interactive and talk about a few things. We would like to share with you enough that you feel comfortable that we actually did serve for the last 3 years, and had some experiences that certainly built our lives, and hopefully many others. This picture, which May took, is really indicative of what we felt like. This group of sisters, 4 of them, they were the last group of sisters that went home on a regular basis, and just 5 days before the pandemic was really recognized in Hong Kong. So in January, the last day of January in 2020, we were doing like we did with all of our missionaries, and took them out and had lunch together and had a hike together. And as we were standing by a bus stop, I saw this bus, and I couldn't believe this sign on the side of it. And yet it's exactly what we went through. Times change, but the mission continues. And that really was our feeling in that. So let me give you an May's going to join me here in a minute, but let me just first of all give you a little bit of introduction so that we're all aware of the mission and what it means. When we were missionaries 40 plus years ago, it was the Hong Kong mission. And it changed its name somewhere in there. I don't know when, but all of a sudden it became the China-Hong Kong mission. And I'll always remember that when they called us, and they announced it in the church news, somebody wrote a headline that said, "Missionaries going to China." and you can change headlines real quickly on the internet. And it wasn't within 10 minutes that they changed it, and they took that off. Because, of course, we weren't going to China. We were going to Hong Kong, which was the China-Hong Kong mission. Anyway, I thought that was interesting. So China, where 1/3 of all the people, 1/4 of the people maybe of the world live. But our mission is just this very small little part at the bottom. Hong Kong, which is a special administrative region, and Macau, which is a special administrative region. But those are 2 very special places. Those are 2 of the 4 most densely populated places in the world. Now, number 1 is a little place called Monaco. And it's highly dense because it's very small and a lot of people. Well, the same thing here. Macau's the number 2 densely populated place in the world, and Hong Kong's number 4. So it's really an interesting place. Our mission included both of these areas, separated by about 26 miles of ocean, Macau and Hong Kong. Hong Kong is about 400 square miles, roughly. Macau is not much bigger than maybe 5 square miles, very small. But that was our mission. And when we first got there, in order to get to Macau, you had to take a ferry, because obviously you couldn't take the bus into China, go around, and come back down on the other side. But in the middle of our mission, a very interesting thing happened. They built a bridge across the ocean. And it was a 26-mile bridge, although it had 6 miles of tunnel. So you would take the bridge, drive out, and then go down under the tunnel, and then come up and go back into Macau. And that made travel to and from Macau quite easy, but not a lot of people used it. But it was nice that we could do that, and I'll explain that to you in just a minute. But Hong Kong, if you think of just Hong Kong, recognize that of the 7.5 to 8 million people that live there, 80% of them live in only 20% of the land. So if you take all of those areas up there that are the green areas, people don't live there. So although Hong Kong is a beautiful, beautiful place, islands, peninsulas, a lot of water, easy to get around, great transportation system, really what Hong Kong is mostly this. Huge buildings, stacked together, people all over the place. And that's what, for most of us, Hong Kong is this busy city. Beautiful city, mind you, but very busy, very crowded. But this is also Hong Kong, and there's a lot of it. And I show this to you because growing up, May, who grew up in that area, didn't recognize the fact that Hong Kong has really got a lot of beautiful and green space in it. Just nobody lives there, and it's not developed. But it really is a beautiful place, and as you get out and hike and look at places, you will see how beautiful Hong Kong really is. Mountains, waterfalls, beaches, all of these great things make up Hong Kong. And they really intersect very closely to the city. So this particular location, you can see the city in the background, but this happens to be the location of the very first baptism in Hong Kong. Before they had anything else, swimming pools or fonts or anything, 3 little girls in 1950 were baptized into the church by the missionaries in Hong Kong in this little pool just off of a very busy part of Hong Kong. That was the Hong Kong that we knew and loved. Now, Sister Phillips, come on up here. We put a little block here because we're not going to mess around with the microphone. We're just going to stand here together and talk. And in my mind, she's much taller than this, but this will do for tonight.
But there's a funny story. After we got evacuated from Hong Kong, and we spent a few months at the MTC, and we got invited to speak to the missionaries there. And that week, they actually closed everything. You know, they had to have all the missionaries, stay in individual room instead of gathering into that big, gigantic hall, I guess, So we basically spoke to just a few people, and then they broadcast it to all different rooms throughout MTC. And
so we're very used to speaking to small groups.
I know. But then the MTC presidency, they were quite huge. They're tall. And they couldn't lower the podium, and so they gave me a block to stand on it and speak that day. But anyway, that reminded me of that. But
Yeah.
okay. Well, okay. So Hong Kong, when we got there in 2018, we had about 130 missionaries serving at the time. Okay. Okay, and they're wonderful, wonderful missionaries. But at the time, we only had one, what we call the Bunde, the local missionary, serving at that time. Just one. And everybody else, they're from all over the world. Now, one thing that's unique about that is, we have quite a big group of missionaries from England. And the reason that we needed the England missionaries to come to Hong Kong is because in Macau, President Phillips talked about the Macau part of the Hong Kong mission. In order for the missionary to stay longer in Macau, we need the missionaries from England because they hold a British passport and they can stay longer in Macau. But if the North American missionaries, they can only go in there and then they can only stay one transfer, 6 weeks, and they will have to come out. So we do have a huge group of missionaries from England. Also, In Hong Kong, most of the people, 90-somewhat% of the people, they speak Cantonese. But then we also have a group of missionaries. They will be called to just speak the Mandarin language. Mainly, they are called to serve the mainland people, the mainland
Chinese
people.
mainland.
Yeah. Okay. So we have a group of them about 20 that are called to only speak the Mandarin language. And also, we also have a group of missionaries called from the Philippines to speak the Tagalog. And they will be working with the over 400,000 domestic helpers in Hong Kong. And this group of people, they are from the Philippines, from Indonesia, from Malaysia. They are there to work as domestic helpers. Because the situation is pretty unique because they don't have their own place. They live with their boss and in a tiny little room with them, with their employer. And so on the day off, they would usually just want to get out and meet the other people from their own country. And you see, they usually will find a spot on the street or overpass or the park, and then they would lay their blanket down, and then all the people would bring their own food and stuff like that, and then they have a good old time, And because a lot of these domestic helpers, they don't necessarily have the Sunday off. They can have a Monday off or Tuesday, Wednesday, whatever the day of the week they get off. And because of that, you will have what we call the everyday branch in Hong Kong for this group of people. They can attend church on a Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday, so forth. And even the temple will be open on Sunday for this group of people. So they could, go and do the ordinance in the temple on a Sunday. These are wonderful, wonderful people, the Filipinos, the Indonesians, and the Malaysians. Very humble people. They usually, their wages that they earn, they usually send the money home to support their family. And they leave their husband, their children, and go to Hong Kong and work. And you feel so bad, and your heart goes out to these people because they have a hard life, and yet they are the happiest people you ever meet, and very generous with their resources, with what they have.
Let me just take 1 second. I'm going to move this up here so we can work it. Thank you.
So this is a picture, to show these two sisters. They are Mandarin-speaking missionaries, and we do have in Hong Kong what they call the visitor program. And what it is just you cannot have missionaries in China. Well, at least
No, let's just stay there.
Okay. Okay.
There are no missionaries in China.
No missionaries in China. And you cannot preach the gospel in China, and we're very careful. We actually tell the missionaries, if anybody call the mission office and the number is a WeChat number, we don't talk to them about the church, okay? But we do have this program where the people in China, they come to know about the church through friends and their families. And they will attend church with their friends and family. And once they get ready for baptism, and the leaders in China, the church leaders in China will contact us in Hong Kong and arrange for a day that they can come to Hong Kong. And then we will have the missionary teach them all day long, and then they will be baptized the same day.
Hong Kong is a unique place culturally. Mostly, huge percentage Buddhist, Taoist, ancestor worship. And so there were a lot of holidays and festivals and a lot of cultural things that we had to be aware of as missionaries. Beautiful temples that were in Hong Kong that we visited, and on our P days we would go and visit these. But that's the culture of most of the people, but those religions are very different for us. I mean, those are not religions that they go to church on Sunday and have worship services. They basically go to those places of worship, burn incense, so to speak, pray to these other deities and perhaps their ancestors. But they're not familiar necessarily with the doctrine or what the beliefs are, but that's what they believe, and they feel very, very loyal to it. In fact, we had this problem, and that was that we would have 20, 25, 30-year-old single investigators of the church that would know the church is true, want to join it, but the pressure from parents to not give up on their local family religion was so strong that so many of them could not overcome that. And that was a difficult thing for us. So the big question was, how do you find people to teach then in Hong Kong? When we were missionaries 40 years ago, we would knock on doors, and we would spend all day knocking on doors. And you could do that. Not so now.
Okay, so finding, we understand, missionary work. You have to find people. If you don't find people, you don't have anybody to teach. So finding is a very crucial part of the missionary work. And I learned fear is not a Christ-like attribute. But it's something that a lot of the missionaries, but particularly the sisters, have to overcome that fear. And I remember the second day after we got to Hong Kong, I went out with the sisters, to go finding on the street. I can't tell you how nerve-wracking that was. I was just so nervous about this. The difference between knocking on doors and finding on the street, to me is, I don't know. Knocking on doors, once they said no to you, they shut the door. You don't see them, so you move on to the next door. But then on the street, I remember talking to somebody, and they told me no. The rejection is so personal. I took it very personal. They rejected me, and they're still there. They're watching me. And it was very difficult. And I gained a lot of appreciation for these young people, what they had to do every single day. Give you an example. I was with some sister, just visiting with them, and one sister, she was training a brand new sister on the mission, and she said they were on the street for hours and hours, and she encouraged her companion. She said, all you need to do just to talk to one person, we can go home. And 2 hours later, they were still on the street. Because it is not an easy thing, to talk to strangers. For somebody like me, and then to overcome it, I just had to keep doing it, keep going out with the sisters, and it got easier. And then I could tell the sisters that, just like the scriptures say, be of good cheer and do not fear, for I, the Lord, am with you and will stand by you. Until those sisters, can overcome those fear, then they become incredible, very effective missionaries.
We found that once COVID hit, it was very difficult to try and stop people on the street. You just couldn't do it. Mm-hmm. We're masked up, they're masked up. It just didn't work, and so we had to come up with new ways to have people stop. And so we really tried the last half of our mission to find new ways that would invite people to stop and talk to us. And it worked quite nicely. And the missionaries came up with a lot of different cool, interesting things. They would put question boards up and just told them they invited people to free English conversation classes, free piano lessons. They would ask questions on the street and try and get response. What makes you happy? What makes you sad? Just ask questions, and people would stop and talk to them because they were prepared. And immediately, this type of a change in our mission was a very positive change, because instead of just trying to stop everybody and talk to everybody, we actually were out there working with God to talk to those people that he had prepared. And no, we didn't talk to as many people. In fact, we told the mission, it was a badge of honor, Elder Fry could tell you this, that you could go out on the street for 8 hours straight and contact people. But it was so grueling and hard. And we changed things, and we said, plan your finding in hour blocks. Think about it, pray about it. Where should I go? Who should I be looking for? And then go out and give it a good hour, then go back and do something else. And it just made a tremendous difference in the mission for them to have what we called a consecrated window of finding on the street. And it truly brought miracles, which I'll tell you a little bit about later on. One of the things we did when we went back is there was a great interest in these foreign missionaries that were in Hong Kong. In fact, it was really interesting that we would be on the subway, the MTR, and people, just total strangers, would come up to us. This is after we came back, and they would say, "We're so glad you're back." I didn't know I had been missed, but they said, "We missed you. We didn't see the missionaries on the street. We're so glad you're back. Thank you for coming back." And I think it was something that they really appreciated. They saw that we were there, not for any ulterior reason, except we really loved Hong Kong and the people, and that was quite interesting. And so we used that to our advantage, and we started to offer English conversation groups. Not classes, but conversation groups, very much with gospel topics that we would discuss in English. But they were so hungry for the ability to teach or to learn English that it was a great thing. In fact, many of the mothers, they just wanted to get their kids talking to foreigners. And so these children's English classes were quite popular and led to many people having interest. We wouldn't make it a requirement of the class that you go to church or that you even hear the lessons, but every lesson, every English lesson would end with a 10, 15-minute thought about the gospel and an invitation. Would you like to hear more? And many of them, no, we're just here for the English, but many of them also found it. In some of the missions in Asia, 30-40% of their baptisms come from English conversation groups. And we were finding that kind of success. Now, there were a few cool things the first year. Now, you might not think this is cool, but the largest typhoon ever to hit Hong Kong hit about 5 months after we got to Hong Kong. Can't even remember the name of it, but we were so excited. Here comes this typhoon. Now, when it hit, we weren't quite so excited because all of a sudden the trees started falling down all around us, and it was quite incredible. And there was quite a bit of damage done, particularly to the trees and the landscape. A little bit of damage to the temple where we lived, but it wasn't bad. But what it gave us was a great opportunity, because we called out to the missionary. We said, "Okay, put your proselyting clothes away for the next 2 or 3 days. You do nothing but go out and find people to help. Go out and find trees that need to be cleared. Go out and find people that need their homes and the floods cleaned up." And it was a great experience for our missionaries to get out and actually do service. Hong Kong's an interesting place. There are many, many service opportunities you could find right here in Utah, but in Hong Kong it was very, very difficult to find service opportunities. There aren't the agencies, there aren't you just can't do it. And whenever you ask one of the local people, "How can I help you?" "Oh, no, don't worry. Go help somebody else. We're fine. And so that was one of the challenges that we had, is to find ways. And so we asked the missionaries, "Get creative. What can you do?" And they did. And they would go out on the streets. They would go out on trails and pick up garbage. They offered a car wash one time. And in every instance when we found ways to serve, we not only helped people and got their appreciation, but the spirit to the missionaries was great also. There's just such good benefit in getting out and helping in the community and letting people see who we are and what we're doing. And we found that to be a great, great blessing. Let's talk a little bit about the members.
Okay. So Hong Kong, we truly love the members of Hong Kong. They are just incredible. Anyway, when we first got there, they love to feed missionaries, just like everywhere else, I guess. They want to take care of missionaries, especially their temporal needs. And so missionary got invited to dinner all the time. Maybe not you. Oh, is that right? Well, that changed. The elders got invited quite a bit. Anyway, so to them, it's like we're taking care of the missionaries, so they don't feel so guilty about not helping with the missionary work. In their mind, they're helping with missionary work. But, for example, after our evacuation, we went back because there were months, there were no missionaries serving in Hong Kong. And the members just miss the missionary so bad. And then there's a change of heart, I think, that all of a sudden they understand that, we need to pick up. We need to step up on the work. I remember in July of 2019, there was a couple weeks that they allowed the in-person sacrament meetings to take place. And we, of course, took advantage of that and went to as many sacrament meetings as possible, and then we were with members. And they would come up to us and just say, we really we need to help you. What can we do? We can't just leave this work to missionaries alone. We got to step up. And we have seen that so much, like we talked about this finding, how we were just counting on doing it on the street to bring in new people to come and listen to the gospel. But the second half of our mission, not so much. It was mostly, we find people to teach because of the referrals from the members. And I testify that, this is God's work. Even though when we had our question about how to find people to teach, the Lord provides many, many times. For example, out of nowhere, we got a call from the university, the Chinese university, the divinity school. And they called the office and just say that we would like to bring 30 of our students and our office people,
Faculties
and
administration.
we'd like to come to learn more about your church. And they did all the arranging, and then they came. And we had such a wonderful time. The missionary came together and gave them this open house and let them know about what we believe. And a lot of them, quite a few of those people that show up for that open house, they actually show up for Sunday sacrament meetings the next few weeks. And that was just amazing to us. And then we had another group. It's a community group that do they call them? The tour group. And so they arranged, got together, 30 somewhat of the people, and they wanted to come and learn more about the church. I mean, we had never heard that before, in the first half of our mission. But on the second half, seems like Heavenly Father just know we need the help. And he arranged, just out of nowhere, we were able to share the gospel with many people.
The members really did, like I said, just strangers on the street would notice that we're back. And the members also, this group that you see up here on the screen, they took it upon themselves. Because of COVID, they couldn't invite the missionaries into the homes to feed them. But every month, they would prepare care packages for all the missionaries, that included food and treats and I mean, you name it, and they were there every month, and they brought this in. They were marvelous people, and they did this with no prodding or invitation from us. They just says, we want to do something to help the missionaries, and we can't do the same things. It was a great group. Let me tell you a little bit more about Hong Kong and what was really central. This is the view out of our second apartment. When we first went to Hong Kong, we lived in the temple, and you can see the temple right there, Angel Moroni there, and then across the street from the temple was the Kowloon Steak Center, which included the distribution center and the mission office. And that was our neighborhood where we lived, and you can see out in the distance, that's the island of Hong Kong, and the city you can see there. That's where we lived, but right in the middle of this community was this wonderful temple, the Hong Kong Temple, which was completed in about 1996. And we lived on the second floor of the temple. There were 3 apartments, the temple president, the mission president, and we had 1 apartment for office elders. And then the church, at the beginning of 2019, announced that they were going to close the Hong Kong Temple. And we thought, what are we going to do? Because it was so central to everything we did. Not only was it right there, and missionaries once a quarter would be able to go to the temple, but we also had a program whereby we called it font to font. Our goal was to get them in the baptismal font, and then within 3 months, get them into the temple font to baptize their family. And it was a very successful program, and 80% of those people that we could get through it stayed strong in the church because of that great feeling of going to the temple. And so we really wondered, what are we going to do without the temple? Number 1, it was our home, and number 2, it was so integral, and we kind of felt like this, kind of homeless in Hong Kong, but not really. We were going to be fine, and in fact, this building right beside the temple is where they found an apartment for us. Our apartment was right here, overlooking the temple, and we thought, this is great. It's like Angel Moroni was there with us every day. How could you not feel good about that? And we could look down and keep track of what was going on until we woke up one morning and they had started the project, and they covered up Moroni, our friend, and they covered up the temple, and they got ready to remodel it, which just like we're experiencing here with our Salt Lake Temple, right? And that's what was happening in Hong Kong, except the difference is we had no Bountiful Temple to go to. We had no Jordan River Temple to go to. And in fact, all those people that come to this temple are from Cambodia, from Vietnam, from Singapore, from Mongolia, from China, and we thought, oh, and I know the brethren thought this through very clearly. In fact, I think that's one of the reasons we've heard of temples be announced in Cambodia and in Thailand and in Singapore. Mm-hmm. And so there was a plan, but for us it was definitely a downer. And then they started the construction on the temple, and we kind of watched it go through, and not much you could do except to just watch it day by day. And then finally, by the way, it's still about a year away from being completed, but this last spring, we finally woke up one day and they had started taking the baggie off the temple. And we said, oh, we're going to be able to see it. And sure enough, we were able finally, just before I left, to take this picture and compare it. So the outside of the temple, they completely took all of the stoneware off the outside and replaced it with some new beautiful stonework, really gorgeous. You can see it's not that much different, but they also took out all 3 apartments, and who knows what other changes they're going to make inside. We're looking forward to seeing that eventually. But the temple will still be a central part. The one thing that was interesting is that the new temple will have no Angel Moroni on it. And we don't know why, but we'll miss Moroni on the top of the temple. Sister Phillips is going to tell you about 2 special events that we used for proselyting and kind of public relations in our mission.
Christmas and Christmas time is always a wonderful time in Hong Kong. It's all decorated and very nicely, and we have the mission choir, and they are just a wonderful tool, to kind of reach the people of Hong Kong. With the help from the members, we have members that book a lot of the facility, for the missionaries to perform. For example, we got the Bank of America, the lobby that we were able to perform a couple times, and with the mall and other places, and everywhere they went, it was well received, and the people of Hong Kong, it was just amazing, as we just right there, to watch the missionaries and help with the work, kind of, and people would just stop and take video of them singing, and then the other missionary will give out the pass along card, the information about the church, and really well received. And then the area public office, one year, they got this electric tram in Hong Kong Island. We call them the Ding Ding, And then they'll go back and forth Hong Kong Island, and they wanted the choir, to sit up on the top deck, just to sing their hearts out. And that we did. We were riding on this Ding Ding, and just go through the island and wishing Now that time we didn't do it during Christmas time. It was right after Christmas and during Chinese New Year, and we were. The missionaries, of course, they're just having a time of their life, they're just wishing the people, happy Chinese New Year, Gong Hei Fa Choi, Happy New Year and everything. And they could always get a smile from the people down below. And it was a wonderful, wonderful tool to spread the gospel.
The first year was very normal in Hong Kong. It was everything they had trained us to do, and then at the beginning of the second year, things really changed. Just a little bit of architectural. This building here, which is, when we were missionaries, this was the area office. This is called the Gumtong building, and this is where baptisms were performed. And every week, if you had people, you would go here. And the church wanted to tear it down and build a high-rise to support the needs of the church. Obviously, the area office couldn't fit in there anymore. And when the government found that out, they said, no, you can't do that. That's a historic building. In fact, it had been. This had been the building, even though it was our area office, it was one of our chapels. It's the place where May got baptized when she was a 13-year-old girl. It was also the headquarters of the Japanese Occupation Army in World War II, when they came and occupied Hong Kong. So it had a lot of historical benefit, and they said, no, you can't tear it down. And so they negotiated, and they found a piece of property that they could trade for it, which was in the middle of a very, very busy place. And they built this 13-story area office. And this then became headquarters. This particular building has in it 4 chapels, and all of the area offices, the top 2 floors of the apartments for the area presidency, and it's just a marvelous building right in the middle of a very busy part of Wan Chai, very close to a park called Victoria Park. And I tell you this not because that's necessarily that interesting, but this became the focal point and the center point for some events that then happened starting in the middle of June in 2019. And that was the protests and demonstrations. They started because of some actions the government was taking or not taking. And there, we won't get into the politics because there are pros and cons on both sides. But all of a sudden, over 1 million people showed up to let the government know about their feelings. And they walked right beside the area office. And so the area presidency, of course, could see that. In fact, they closed down the area office. And we didn't know what was going to happen. So, we kept the missionaries in. But that first protest was just really, really peaceful. People just marching, nothing happening. At the end of the march, they all marched back, cleaning up their mess after them, and by the next day, you couldn't even tell there had been anything going. As protests go, this was very, very gentlemanly, genteel. But it was a harbinger for things to come. And all of a sudden, all around Hong Kong, we started seeing these walls, whether it was an overpass or an underpass. People started just plastering the wall with political statements and their own feelings. And so you could see that it was warming up. Then they started with a little bit of graffiti here and there on some pretty important buildings. And then by the middle of July, they weren't getting the response they wanted, and so they took their protest out to the international airport. And they basically commandeered the airport. And nobody could get in, nobody could get out. And for 2 weeks they did this. For 2 weeks they kept the airport pretty well locked down, and that kind of made everybody a little bit nervous, particularly the brethren, because if we couldn't get missionaries in and out, that was a problem. Plus, if this protest that we saw escalated to the point that it turned against foreigners, or it turned against the church, or soldiers became involved, you can see why they might have been concerned. And so right after Elder Fry's group went home, Elder Fry had been a part of, I say Elder Fry, but you all know him as Corwin. After he went home, he was a part of the largest group of missionaries that we were aware of. And they went home, the brethren said, okay, no more missionaries going to Hong Kong. And so we went 4 months with no new missionaries coming into Hong Kong, which is really hard for a mission, because you keep seeing these missionaries leave, and the mission keeps getting younger and younger, and the old ones leave and no new ones come, and there's no leadership opportunity. Just a lot of things to do with that, and we needed missionaries. And how about all those missionaries that had calls to come to Hong Kong that were in the MTC but now had no place to go? Well, they put them in temporary assignments, which we're very used to now, but at that time, nobody was, that was unusual. And those missionaries were just waiting somewhere in the States until they could come to Hong Kong. And so we went for many months with no missionaries. Until about at the end of October, the missionary department said, okay, we think we can send some missionaries to you about the middle of November. We said, that would be great. That would be great. And it was at that point that something ticked in the protesters, and they went to the very most violent and disruptive protests that they had had. Now, to give you a little bit of background, you've seen this picture. You kind of know where we are. If you look right up here, this is a big university. This building over here are the dormitories. This is City University, one of the largest. And the students at that time took over 4 universities. Hong Kong University, Polytechnic University, and then City University and Baptist University. Well, why is that important? Well, this street you see here, right here, is Cornwall Street, and it comes right down here. Very, very busy thoroughfare, and it runs right through the middle of this one university. So if you look at a map, here we sit in this location here. That's where the temple is, and that's where we work. Down here was the Hong Kong Baptist University, another big university which was going to be taken over by the protesters. On the other side was the Hong Kong City University with the dormitories here. We were right in the middle of these 2 universities that were going to be taken over by protesters. And they closed this whole road down. Now, what do I mean by closed it down? Well, the strategy for the protesters is to disrupt what's going on in the city, whether that's disrupt the MTR, the subway, or to stop businesses from, or to stop traffic. And they did it in a very non-violent way, but they did it. So, for example, you can see here, they took the overpass between the dormitory and the university, and they took that over, and then they went down on the street and they covered it in rocks and garbage cans and trees, and anything they could get their hands on, they threw it out into the street. And it totally disrupted the traffic. So the police came, and as we were looking out our window this one morning, we could see our quiet little neighborhood that had not been touched at all by the protest was now right in the middle of it. And the police moved the protesters off, and they cleaned it up a little bit, but as soon as the police left, the protesters came right back, and it was even worse. And the street was totally closed down. And it went all the way down. You can see this is how they would block the streets. They would just pile bricks up. They would get the bricks out of the sidewalks on the side, and they would take whatever they could to block. And then up here, they totally barricaded the street so that nothing could get through. And for a city that is so dependent upon public transportation, this was very disruptive. For us, it was very disruptive. We had missionaries that needed to leave. We had missionaries that were going to come. And in fact, the missionaries were scheduled to come the very next day. I got a call from the mission office. They said, "Can we send them? Can we send them?" And of course we said, "Of course, no problem, send them." We can handle it, no problem. And so we did. You can see that the temple, which was right in the middle of this, also was graffitied. And anyway, so we went out to the airport to pick up these missionaries with a bus. And we just hoped it would all go well. The protests were going strong. We got there, and as we were coming home, the GPS in Hong Kong is really cool because of the closures of roads, you could watch on your map, and as a street became impassable because of protest, it would turn red. So you knew to avoid that. Well, as we came back, this 30-mile trip from the airport back into town, we're sitting there watching the roads start to close. And we needed to get to that hotel where the missionaries were going to stay. And we thought, can we do it? Can we do it? And as we got closer and closer, more and more roads closed. And finally, we were about half a mile away. And the one road we needed to go through closed. And I said, let's just keep going. We can do it. And we went through that intersection. Hotel on the other side, we had to get through it. And on one side of the road were the policemen with their tear gas, and on the other side of the road were the protesters with their umbrellas. And we just went right through it, and that bus with those 20 new missionaries was just deadly silent. What have we got ourselves into? It was incredible, and yet it was good. Now, a month or two before, in August, the area presidency has said, "President Phillips, you need to train your missionaries in case we need to leave, in case it gets bad, in case they're in danger, in case there are soldiers involved." So we had a meeting in August with all the missionaries, senior missionaries, young missionaries, and we explained to them a plan for how we would evacuate Hong Kong. And it was fairly well organized. We hoped it would never have to happen, but we taught them how to do it. That we would contact them, they would do this, they would do this, they would do this, we would meet at the airport, and we would go. And we said, now just to make sure you know that it's really coming from us and not from somebody that's trying to trick you, we have a code word that we want you to listen for. And if you hear that, then you know it's true, and go for it. And we thought, okay, what's the code word? What's the code word? And we finally came up with one that nobody could guess, and it was Jello Nation. Real serious one. Jello Nation was our code word, and we thought, we'll never use it, but everybody remembered it. And even at the height of these protests, we didn't need to do it. And in fact, this was the height, and then it came down. And we welcomed these 20 missionaries, wonderful missionaries, who had been staying in missions in the United States until their chance to come. And they came, and we started feeling great again about the mission, and we had several others. This was in November, December, January. And then Chinese New Year's hit.
But we, during that time, it was interesting because we have all this group waiting to come in, so instead of sending them every transfer every 6 weeks, we're actually getting the missionaries every 2 weeks, from November until the end of January. We're getting them every 2 weeks. And it's wonderful to have them, as you can imagine. So, it's
Chinese New Year.
Chinese New Year. Well, Chinese New Year is always a fun time in Hong Kong. But the particular Chinese New Year, we heard a little something about the pandemic.
Which at that time was no pandemic, it was just this
Yeah.
little virus up in China.
Yeah, but, not too many people even thought too much of it. A lot of people would go back, have families in China. They would go home and spend the Chinese New Year, and then they would return. But then, the word kind of spread pretty fast. And before we know it, we were told that we need to make sure the missionaries know what to do, because this sounds like something big, and so we need to train them how to take care of the hygiene, that they have to wear masks, we give them sanitizer mask, and make sure that they would do that every single time when they go out. They would sanitize their hands upon returning to their homes. But it's only, and then we got words that we need to keep them in for some kind of a lockdown, not totally lockdown, but for 8 days they were told to stay in the apartment and not to go out on the street to go finding. And then at the time, we also said, okay, this is what you can do in your apartment. They were always so busy, not have the time to take care of their area books, to update it. So we told them that, they need to work on a perfect area book while they are in semi-lockdown, and they can go out for food, for exercise. And then that was 8 days. And then on a Wednesday morning, President Phillips had to go to the office.
But what happened on Monday?
Oh, yeah, on Monday, we had 8 missionaries in Macau. And at the time, we know that they were going to close the boat. You cannot travel by boat to get to Macau. And so we know that if they ever close the border, you will have 8 missionaries got stuck in Macau and cannot come back. And so President Phillips, Dennis, had this inspiration. He said, I gotta get them out. And so on Monday, he was talking to the area presidency and said that, I feel strong that we needed to bring those missionaries back to Hong Kong. And so on Tuesday morning, we just told the missionary to pack up and just bring everything back to Hong Kong, and we'll meet them at the bus station, and so basically they took the bus, and go through that 6 miles of reach to come back to Hong Kong, and we met them at the station and took them, and then we got them settled, and then on Wednesday morning, President Phillips had this meeting with the
By the way, Wednesday morning, Hong Kong government officially closed the borders between China, Hong Kong, and China and Macau. And if we hadn't moved them on that Tuesday, the only way they could have got out was to take a plane to someplace else. They could have never come back to Hong Kong. Mm-hmm. We had no idea that was going to happen, but the Lord did.
Yeah. So, and then on Wednesday, he was meeting had a conference call with everybody in Salt Lake, and the decision was made that they're going to evacuate the whole mission. And so I was just outside the office waiting for him. And then when he opened the door, we knew something was up, and then he just told me, that we needed to evacuate. And so, I'm sure you can imagine how hard it would be to say goodbye to all 120 missionaries. It was hard to say goodbye to a few. Oh.
We had a good cry, and then we said, okay, let's get to work. And I sent a text out to all the missionaries, and I said, I would love to be there with you and hug you and tell you how much we love you. But the fact is, we're going to have to leave Hong Kong, so please start the process. And then I sent a second text, and I said, just so you're aware that this is true, Jello Nation. And that brought enough of a levity to it that they said, okay, let's get to work. And they were all prepared, and they were ready. They had prepared to evacuate because of the protests, but again, we were prepared for whatever the Lord knew was going to happen.
Yeah. And so within 24 hours, we got all of the missionaries on the plane, and except the 4 office elders. And then we took them on Thursday, and they left on Thursday, and then we left on Saturday.
We hired a bus. We said, everybody be here by 6 o'clock. This is Wednesday morning. We said, be at the office, clean out your apartments, pack up, and get here by 6 o'clock. And all night, the first plane took off at midnight, and by the middle of the day on Thursday, they were all gone. We rented a bus. We kept that bus busy just going back and forth between the airport and the mission home. We had them organized into groups, and they went home, all hoping that within a week or two they would be back in Hong Kong. That wasn't the case.
Yeah.
We had these 4 wonderful missionaries that helped us, and we sent them off, and then it was only us left for just a day or two.
But then there were 2 groups of missionaries. Unlike the North Americans, the North Americans were told that they would get a temporary assignment after the 2 weeks quarantine at home. But the 2 groups is the Filipinos missionaries. They couldn't go home because their homes wouldn't be able to allow them to quarantine at home. And so they ended up doing their quarantine in the MTC in the Manila, yeah?
Manila.
Yeah, and and then the second group that, just almost broke our heart as the native. Now, we'd mentioned that, when we started the mission, there was only 1 local missionary. And by the time of the evacuation, we had 11 of them. But this group of missionaries, they couldn't go anywhere. They had to stay in Hong Kong. They have to be released. But they had no idea, how long they would have to be sitting at home, how long they would have to put their life on hold, to continue to serve. And so after we got the rest of the missionary off, we met with their parents and just told them how much we appreciated, their service. And let them know that, we hope it's not a forever thing. We hope to be back, and they can come back and serve together with us and finish off the mission.
We really, that was probably one of the most tender parts of the evacuation were these 11 missionaries that had to go home and be released, and they could go no place else to continue their mission. Right in the middle, Elder Yeep in the white shirt, he had been out 8 days. He had started his mission 8 days ago, and now he was going home to be released. With they couldn't go to another country. They couldn't go to another mission. That was all they could do. And it was tearful. But the missionaries, as they left that day, they said, President, Sister Phillips, what are you doing for lunch tomorrow? And the next day they came back in their street clothes, having all been released. And we went and had some noodles together. And that was just one of those tender mercies. Really, this group kept the mission going while we were gone. And we called on them many times, even though they weren't set apart anymore. They really helped us. And President Sister Phillips, well, it was the middle of February. We were back in the snow in Utah. Put in the MTC in Provo, eventually into the married student housing across the street. And like all good things that are associated with the Phillips, it was 3 weeks, and then they closed the MTC down. So I don't know what it is about us. But wherever we go, they close the temple, they close the mission, now they close the MTC, and I'm just thinking maybe we shouldn't come home to Mount Olympus Stake, President Young's not here, we're okay. But we stayed there for 3 months. Didn't know how long it would be. We had assignments from the missionary department to help with, with my data background, I helped as the pandemic really started to rage. Missionaries had to be moved all across the world, and so I would spend my days on the computer moving missionaries in the computer system so that they knew where they were. Sister Phillips, on the other hand, well, she really held the mission together, because we had all these missionaries in 30 different missions across every country you could imagine, all hoping to come back to Hong Kong, all hoping to keep up their Cantonese, most of them in missions that had no Chinese. And Sister Phillips spent her days, 10 to 12 hours every day, on the phone, on Facebook, on video, talking Chinese to these missionaries. And they were, most of them, locked down anyway. But we set up a spreadsheet online, and we said, just sign up for a half hour. And then they would call Sister Phillips and May. She'll always be Sister Phillips. They would call May, and she would practice their discussions with them. She would practice everything she could to just keep their language up and going. And it was marvelous to see, and it really was the glue that held us together with hope for the future, with really not knowing what it would be. Well, 3 months later, I got a call from Elder Homer in the area presidency. He said, they've approved you to come back to Hong Kong. I said, great. He said, that's the good news. The bad news is you'll have no missionaries. And I go, okay, it's all right. Just get us there. We'll figure it out. And so we couldn't tell anybody for whatever reason. And so we took a 40-hour flight from here to Dallas to London and into Hong Kong, because so many of the flights had been canceled. And we arrived in Hong Kong, quarantined for 2 weeks, and then tried to decide, okay, what do we do now? What do we do now? And it was 2 weeks later that in talking to the area president, he said, look, we've got missionaries here that could serve right now. They're at home. There's no danger from them serving. We may as well get them back. And they finally agreed. And so we brought back 8 of the 11 missionaries. One, his time had come up and he went home, and 2 others decided for whatever reason to not come back. But 8 of them came back, and then we found a whole group of other missionaries that had been called to serve in other places, England, Canada, United States, Philippines, but they couldn't go. We said, we'll take them. We'll take them all. And so we started the mission up again with this group. So when we first got there, we had 1 local missionary. When we started the mission up again, what did we have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 10, and eventually 13, and eventually 22, all local missionaries. We would go to zone conferences, we would go to training centers, and the leaders of the mission that we called at that time, they would look at us as we started the meeting and said, do you want us to talk in English or Chinese? I'd say, whatever you want. And so our meetings were all held in Chinese, which was really pretty cool. I was the only white face there. It was okay. But the mission was going again. And these missionaries were just so excited to be back and to serving again. We also had to make decisions. We had to decide, so where do we go? Where do we put all of these missionaries? Because there were 6 stakes. There were 43 different units. Where do we put this few handful of missionaries? And the Lord led us in that. And there were some miraculous events around where missionaries were assigned to go and who they were assigned to work with. But these missionaries were fantastic and wonderful. But we really needed, these were all very young missionaries, and the culture of the mission was just not quite there, and we needed that. And so we kept working on the mission department, the area presidency. When can you send us back some of our missionaries? And it took them a long time. It took them 6 months to finally agree. But they finally said, okay, we've got 18 elders that we can send to you. The criteria was you had to have at least 6 months left in your mission to go back to your original mission. And they gave me this list of 18 elders, and I said, wait a minute, there's no sisters here. And they go, well, they're all the sisters, they don't, none of them have enough time left. And I looked through the list, and I said, These two sisters, they have 5.5 months left. If I can get them to extend for a month, would you let them come? Because we needed experienced sisters to help. All of these sisters were very young, and we just needed that experience. And I called these two sisters, and they would have done anything to be able to come back to Hong Kong, and they both agreed to stay an extra month, so they fit in the criteria. And so we got 22 missionaries back from the States to go along with our 22 missionaries that were there. And the mission was incredible because now every local missionary had a North American companion. Every North American companion had a native companion, and the language just blossomed, and the culture just blossomed, and all of a sudden the mission was going back. And when we left, this was the Zone Conference just shortly before we left, and that's what the mission looked like. It was a great thing to see, all of these missionaries. North America, Chinese, working together, everything they needed.
I'll go sit down.
Do you want to add anything to that?
No, it's good.
Let me just end. We're way over time, and let me just end with, you can sit down if you like. Just end with a story, because I think the most important thing we learned through this whole thing was to listen to the Spirit and to act when the Spirit prompted. Because if you did, things went well. When you ignored those promptings, then you might have had some challenges. We had a couple of sister missionaries that found that out the same way. Sister Yaso. These two sister missionaries were out one night. They had promised the Lord, we will go out and find in this location for 1 hour from 8 to 9 o'clock on a cold December night. Rainy, cold. And about 8:30, it was cold enough that they could easily have said, we're going to go back to our apartment and make calls, and we'll keep working, but we're going to go back where it's warm. But they didn't. And they stayed out. And just at the end, just prior to 9 o'clock, this man came running up. He had been out jogging. He came up and he saw the sisters, and he said, are you missionaries? Can I come to your church? And it was an answer to prayers. It was exactly what they had expected. The Lord had said, if you do this, I'll bring the elect to you. And he did. Now this man, George, he didn't give him his name, he didn't give him his number, but they gave him the address for the church and the time of the meetings. He said, I'll see you Sunday, and he kept running. We've heard that before. Many people say that, I'll see you Sunday, and we never see him again. But George showed up on Sunday. In fact, we found out later he showed up on Saturday because he wanted to make sure he knew where the chapel was and that it was right. He showed up at church on Sunday. He stayed for the whole block. He then stayed for 3 hours after to listen to as many lessons as the missionaries would teach. And when he heard the sisters tell him about the gift of the Holy Ghost, he said, I need that. What do I need to do to get that? Well, they had the answer. And it was just 3 weeks later, still in the month of December, sisters were still looking for a white Christmas, that George got baptized and became a strong member of that ward. It was just a couple of months later when he received the priesthood and he became a leader in the young men's organization. He eventually relocated into China, where I'm sure he's continuing to do the Lord's work, and we saw him as he would come down. But what we found is that if the missionaries would listen to the Spirit, he would lead them to those that he had prepared. Even on the last day of their mission, if they listened to the Spirit, he would lead them to the elect. So, I bear you my testimony, brothers and sisters. This is the Lord's work. Why he trusts it to us sometimes is a mystery to me, but I'm so grateful that he does. Because it's a blessing to us, to our families, and hopefully we bless his children too. And everything out there, he knows. I have no doubt. And the plan is there. And the mission now is in great hands. It's probably up to 70 missionaries now. The new mission president is a local leader. He was a stake president that I worked with for 3 years. And President Chan is going to be a great leader in that mission. And Hong Kong is resilient. And Hong Kong will bounce back. And the church will continue to grow. And the temple will be dedicated next year. And I just have nothing but high hopes and great confidence that the Lord is directing the work there. And I bury this testimony in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Our dear Father in heaven, we are grateful for the opportunity we have had to be here this day, to participate in this fireside, and to hear President and Sister Phillips share the experiences they've had on their mission. We are grateful for their dedication, for their faith, for their service, for their example that they have always shown. We're grateful that they and their missionaries were protected through so many events. We are grateful that we have been able to see thy hand in the work as it goes forth to gathering this scattered Israel, to spread the gospel, to receive those who are willing and wanting to hear the message from the missionaries and to participate in the church. We are grateful that the work of temples is moving forward, even amongst the many challenges throughout the world at this time. We are thankful for a living prophet, for his guidance, for those who serve with him, his counselors, the members of the Quorum of the 12, the general leaders throughout the church. We ask thy blessings upon them and for thy protection to be with them. Likewise, we pray for all the missionaries as they serve throughout the world and mission leaders. We're grateful for their faith and pray that thou wilt bless them in their efforts. Please bless us as we fulfill our various responsibilities. We are thankful for the many gifts that thou dost bless us with. Particularly, we are grateful for the gift of the Holy Ghost. Pray that we will listen and obey things that we are prompted to do. We pray this weekend as people travel that they will be safe and spend time with their families. I pray for those who mourn the loss of loved ones. Pray for those that are ill, that they may be healed if it be thy will. And we are grateful for this Sabbath day and the opportunities it has provided us. And we say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.